Good evening, everyone, and welcome to everyone here and wherever, here and there and nowhere. I know quite a lot of people are tuning in and listening to this whenever they can. Of course, there's every little benefit whenever one can listen, but it's even more beneficial if one can actually make the discipline to listen and follow these materials, because all the materials is on air, particularly on YouTube and Facebook, that people can watch anytime. But even if you miss one lesson because you couldn't, they are all there, then there's a bit of continuity from where we're going through. So that's just encouraging those people not to give up because they miss one or two sessions, but always continue. Even if you haven't much time to go over it in the past, always welcome to join and listen to those. We are currently looking at the 6th chapter of Chandrakirti's classic writing on how to enter in the middle way. Almost suggesting that we are loitering in extreme roads of life and not finding our way to go on the middle and safe way, the safe way of the Buddha. So in the middle way, entering in the middle way, so here Chandrakirti has put into 10 chapters. Each of these chapters are named as generation of altruism, level 1, level 2, and so on up to the 10th. So this is the 6th stage of augmenting one's selflessness, not just as a conduct, but also as a philosophy and wisdom, and most importantly in one's meditation practice. How to boost your meditation with bodhicitta. Altruism, not just with a heavy workload of amount of hours you have to do, but make sure that it has the quintessence, which is the altruism. So this of course, these 10 levels of the bodhicitta are 10 levels of bodhisattvahood who have achieved first to the 10th bhumis. So it's not talking about our everyday person's attempt to develop altruism. Of course, it is all recommended to work on that, but these are the description of the realization of the views of those who have reached the 6th stage, like approaching to realize the enlightenment. And so therefore, here the various arguments about various schools of ancient India. Mostly what we have dealt so far is the schools that is belonging to non-Buddhist schools. Now currently we look at dealing with within Buddhist schools. And so we have reached as far as presenting the views, a theory of Chittamatrin, the mind-only school, who thinks the mind is the most important substratum, and it is always there. And now this particular Madhyamika, middle way school, needs to build its argument, knowing the benefit of having a mind-only school, but at the same time limitation of the mind-only school. So this, of course, ideally talking about those who reach the sixth enlightenment thought. But for some majority, I would say we are included, would draw a lot of comfort by knowing everything is just my mind, and then learning to change one's mind. So that might be the stage. Quite a lot of people nowadays think, it's only in my mind, and I'll have to do some work on that. But here, the theory of knowing what the mind-only school's views are, particularly the three three things. What is called how the phenomena are merely imputed, and whatever is imputed is necessarily dependent, because the imputer has to impute on something. He can't impute itself. So the word imputation is dependent on what the thing is, and even relative sense. So your imputation is dependent on something else, not just merely the imputation itself. And so with the consciousness of the mind only, and dependent on other things, what it imputes, and then what it realizes. The third one is what it actually accomplishes. So mind-only school view has been presented, the theory has been presented so far up to verse number 47 in page 196. So we're going starting tonight on page 996, there where we will look at the firstly the why we have to oppose the mind-only school theory. So first, it's when it says second, the first one we have already presented the theory view of the mind-only school. So we have to first describing the reasoning to oppose the mind-only school. So this is three. First is reasoning to refute the mind-only reasoning. Second is the intent of teaching on the mind-only. So that is the intent. And the third one is opposing thus supporting scriptures that are shown as interpretive. Of these three, the first is the reasoning to refute the mind-only reasoning has three subdivisions. First is indicating failure in the two truths, true means relative and ultimate truth. Second is the faults of failing in the true truth. Third is rejecting similarity in mere convention truth. So those are three subdivisions within that. And then of the first of these three, indicating failure in the true truth has three subdivisions. First is negating the existence of mind only without a knowable object, because you can't have a mind only without object to know about. So that's the main argument. Second is negating substantial existence of paratantra. Paratantra really means dependent, yeah? Substantial existence of a dependence, which is free of duality. So that you can't have dependent origination without duality. And the third is negating it as the cause of existence of imputed entities. So these are very, very important and need to understand them. So we're going to deal each of them one by one. The first is negating the existence of mind only without a knowable object. Which is the one of the weakest link of mind-only school, because it says that the mind is the only thing that there is, and then who knows it, Is it an object? Is it a subjective expression, a mind only, or it's in relation to only by having a thing to know about, Is explaining at length and summarizing the point. Those are two. First is explaining at length has four subdivisions. So this way of categorizing the outline actually is a masterpiece of Korampa, the author, 15th century author. So Kenshin uses these the outline. The example of erroneous mind consciousness does not accomplish the point. So that's the first point will be made shortly in that verse. Second example of erroneous sense consciousness. Since erroneous mind consciousness is different from erroneous sense consciousness, does not accomplish the point. So that's the second. Third is example of erroneous meditative mind does not accomplish the point. So even meditative mind will have an erroneous meditative mind. So you have those three. And the fourth is example of erroneous vision does not accomplish the point. So these four will be dealt in the following text. First, we will deal with example of erroneous mind consciousness, how it does not accomplish the point. This has two: refuting the thesis and refuting the reasonings. First, refuting the thesis is shown by one verse. So this is the verse. This is the presentation of still the mind-only school, because we have to refute it. So I read the text in Tibetan before. Shiro mesem perne kangtuyo milam chishin shenante samcha ganze ngala milam nayang sem yumin teze kyugi peyo means. So this says, but what example can you give of mind without an outer world? So now we are arguing the mind-only school, because they think there is the mind that alone exists. What example can you give of a mind without an outer world? And how do you know the mind? It's like a dream, you say, but this we must examine. They use the analogy the mind is like a dream. And then he says, okay, we'll come to examine that. I hold that even if when I dream, my mind does not exist. So example that you give has therefore no validity. Now this is the counter-argument to that. So here the commentary goes to explain these four examples as four analogies. The first one is the dream mind. Yeah? Second is is unclear eyesight. So the unclear sense consciousness. Third is the meditative mind. So there's three mind. One is a dream mind, conditioned by sleep. Yeah, dream mind is conditioned by sleep, and one who has cataract is influenced by his eye sense consciousness, and then the meditative mind. And the fourth one is a hungry ghost, mind of the hungry ghost, who doesn't see water when everybody can see water. So these four are given as an example. With regard to the first, the Madhyamika, or the mind, the middle way school says to the mind-only school, you say that there is no external object, only mind. You say there's only mind, there's no external. But do you have any examples to prove your point? And how do you authenticate or validate the mind only without a reference object, such as object? So this middle way school, which is the middle way school, raises the question, and the Yogacara school now gives the answer. Yogacara is the mind-only school. Yeah, mind-only school replies that there is an example of a dream state. So he says, how about the dream? Which proves that there is a mind but no external object, which is quite a useful argument, because you don't have to see things to dream, without object, you can dream. So he says, with just mind, you don't need an object. So they think that's a smart example. But Madhyamika says, firstly, mind does not exist even while dreaming. Mind does not exist even while dreaming. So you do not have an example to prove your point. You seem to be saying that there's only mind when a person dreams, but according to us, just as the external object does not exist, neither does the mind. Neither does the mind exist. In brief, the Madhyamika says that even when we are dreaming, the mind does not exist. If you dream of an elephant, just as there is no elephant, neither is there any mind. There is no eye consciousness to see the elephant. This is refuting the thesis in a brief way. So that's the first one. The first one is refuting the erroneous consciousness, erroneous mind. Example of erroneous mind, because the mind is dreaming. Erroneous mind is conditioned by the dream. And it can see things without objects. So therefore, they say that's a proof of mind only. You don't need an external object to have the seeing. And that's a brief way. But so we will then refuting that is proven in the evidence of recollection. So next one is now replying, because that's their argument. Yeah, their argument in relation to all those four analogies: dream mind, unclear eyesight, meditative mind, and hungry ghost mind. So here it will be now replied in the next verse. But when we awake, you say we can recall our dreams. This shows mind exists. So that's but when it follows, then it follows that the objects of a dream exist likewise. Just as you remember that you dreamt, you also can remember what you dreamt about. So kalde setse melam tenla yona chiro yulan te shingju. Chidar kyugi ngento nyam temba tenda chiro la yobayins. So this is talking about when you come out of dream, you look back and remember dreaming. You can remember the dream, in other words. Because you can remember the dream, this proves that there was a mind in existence at the time of dreaming. In other words, remembrance is a proof of an experience. This means that in the dream, something was experienced, and that which experience was the mind. If you say that, then the same principle applies to external object also. In the same way, you can also remember the object. If we remember that we have seen an elephant, both things are remembered in the same way. You do not just remember the elephant, because if you remember only the elephant, not the mind, you will think that your friend or somebody else saw the elephant. Both the object and mind are remembered. So if you try to prove the existence of mind through recollection, you have to accept the existence of external object too. Now, this is because mind-only school says there's no object whatsoever. It's all in the mind. So that's the kind of extreme view. So that's so this is counter-argument. Second is refuting that it is proven by dream itself. This is true, presenting the mind-only school view again, and then refuting that. So the mind-only school replies to that counter argument. Kaldinina miglo misipe yumishigi sheba yukonayos. Teye namba chiro nitu shen milam chishin teshin nas. So in sleep you say there is no visual consciousness and thus no object seen. The mental consciousness alone is operative. This is mind-only view, yeah? Its aspects are assumed to be existing outwardly, and as with dreams, so too with waking life. This is mind-only school arguing back, yeah? That's very important. That needs to be clarified a little, particularly the third line. Its aspects are assumed to be existing outwardly, you know? So it's assumption, yeah? This verse is a theory presented mind-only school. So they say that in sleep there's no eye consciousness because eye is closed, you know? The only consciousness that exists is mind consciousness. The mind consciousness appears as external object in a dream. If you sleep in a small room and a dream of a large elephant, then you wake up, you know that your mind was there, but the elephant could not have been there because it could not fit inside the small room. In other words, elephant was not there, but the mind was there. So that's their argument, you know, Yogacara, the mind-only school, is trying to thereby explain nothing other than the mind consciousness exists, because that's why I call mind only. The things we dream about are just projections of the mind consciousness that appears in different manifestation, including external object. These are grasped and held as external object during sleep. Just as we do in dreams, we do in waking state. Whether we are awake or asleep, everything that appears in the projection mind. But people do not know that. They impute what they see to be external, but what this means is that as it is here, also it is also in the waking state. That is the theory of mind-only school. So this is presenting mind-only school view, yeah? Because we have to know the view of the other in order to see either a strength or weakness in it before we do the refuting. So to refute that view, the second refuting the view has three subdivisions. First, knowing an object of dream has no truth. Second, knowing an object when awake has no truth. Third, therefore, existence and non-existence are equally presented. First, knowing an object in dream has no truth is explained by this verse and one more line, so altogether 5 lines, which in Tibetan reads, Chandrakirti chiro milamtu magye tishin yigan ge maye naso sumbo lama gewa me milam chidar tishin se zeba ngunam zuyin tena mayins. So it says, but just as outer objects in your dream are unproduced, the consciousness beholding them is likewise unproduced. The faculty, the object seen, the consciousness that they create, these three things, these three indeed are all deceptive fancies. For hearing and the rest, so just like eye, visual conscious, like other senses as well, like hearing and the rest, these three are likewise unproduced. So whether for the hearing, the sound and the consciousness, and smelling and the smell and conscious, these are all never produced at all. So this is now explained. This shows the object or objects in dream have no truth, meaning objects in dream don't have any validity. The mind-only school is saying that external object is not present, but the mind that sees is present. This is now negated here. Just as you believe that external objects are not produced in dream, you should know that the mind is not produced either. One must know that all the three factors of the seeing in dream, meaning the eye sense organ, the visual object, eye consciousness, or the mind which sees the visual object, should not be understood as equally false. So they are not true. In the same way, this should be applied to ear and sound and so on. So that's talking about the lack of truth. Lack of truth in knowing the object in the dream. Second is knowing an object even when you're awake. That what we see in a wakeful state is also not true. This is shown by three remaining lines. Remaining lines. Miknam miki yutu tekeba sumbo tamjekyane zumbayi joyu meje wangbo namgyang mes. As in dreams, so also in waking state. Phenomena are false illusions. Indeed, there is no mind, there are no objects, and there are no senses. Now, this is the Madhyamika, the middle way's argument. Just as the three factors, the objects and the sense organ and sense perception do not exist in dream, neither do they exist in a awakened state. There is no knower. Knowing mind or the object of enjoyment, meaning object on which the mind functions. The Madhyamika middle way tries to prove the similarity of all these three factors, whereas mind-only school tries to draw a distinction between mind and the object or the knowledge and the knowable things. Madhyamika says that if mind exists, so does the knowable object. If the knowable object does not exist, then neither does the knowledge or the mind. So if we were to look at it, any example without, say, thinking of some ancient schools arguing about it, usually when we see something, look at something or listen to something, we straight away have this undoubted perception that this is book, as the object itself, either the object itself independently existing. What it's saying is the object itself is doesn't exist from its own side, except that we impute it to it. We labeled, we conventionally agreed to it as a book. But otherwise, it's just a bundle of pages. It might not even be book, unless it's bound. It's just pages. It may never be book unless it is printed. So even if it's bound, it's not book. If it's printed, maybe. So there are many definitions that we have factored in to make things appear. But we often have this conventional reality as things exist from its own side, or from our imputation, or the way or the fact that our mind thinks it is. And because we're so used in thinking that a thing exists because it appears to exist, but we don't realize it was completely imputed and conventionalized. If there is no naming and conventionally agreeing to the name, we wouldn't know which is which. So therefore, conventionally, we have to distinguish A from B, house number 1 from house number 2. And so even though house number 2 is not truly existing house number 2, because it's totally dependent on having another house beside it. So number 1 only makes number 2 possible. So therefore, there's no true that truly exists from its own side. So when you're able to see that, then at least on the relative functionality, we have things that they are. But here the argument is just as the mind only is not the thing, nor does the thing itself exist independently. They are just this mutually inclusive way of looking. Then we know, even in a wakeful state of mind, we know that there is no mind or the object or the sense organs that independently exist. For instance, if we remove the eye organ here, gouge the eyes, put it there. It's an eye organ, but it hasn't got eye consciousness there, because by the time it leaves the socket, I think it probably hasn't got the eye consciousness of this person. It might be transplantable in someone else to connect it straight away, but itself is not an eye, because it has to have the component that goes with it. So only when so therefore, independently, each of these three, be that object, or be that the mind or the senses, all are not true. No truth means they do not truly independently exist. Therefore, the third point is existence and non-existence are equally presented in the next verse. Dina chitra seshin chishin tu masi tesi tela sumboyu. Seper kyuna sumja yumin timu nise le te teshin no. So both when we are awake and when we are not aroused from sleep, these three appear to be. These same three melt away when our dreams we stir, and so it is when waking from the sleep of nescience. So this talking about when we dream, all the three factors seem to exist. You cannot make the differentiation made by the mind-only school. You can't distinguish this is mind only, the other, the object, and the knowing. When you wake up from the sleep, you realize that none of this is there. Neither the mind, nor the seeing, the visual consciousness, nor the elephant. In the same way, what we see as these three factors while we awake all exist in a conventional truth. The eye sense organ is there, the visual object is there, and the eye consciousness is there. All three are there to the mind of the ordinary person in the awakened state. When we wake from the sleep of ignorance, it is like coming out of sleep. When we realize emptiness, the actual mode of being of all phenomena, we will know that these three things do not exist at all. It should be explained at this level. So this level really means when we normally have certain issues in our mind, we don't realize the thing doesn't really exist from its own side. Because one's attachment to the appearance as real and wanting it to be permanent, wanting to hold it, and then we really put lots of wrong view in thinking it is truly existing. But we haven't woken up from the sleep of ignorance. One who has woken up from the sleep of sleep knows the dream and the dreamt and what he saw are not truly existent. Even though what he dreamt in the sleep is experience, but as experience in the dreamt state is not in the wakened state. Likewise, the thing that you think is real or person that is bad or whatever is only perceived when you've fallen asleep. In the ignorance of grasping to me and the other and desire and impermanent is permanence, and when you put all this sleepy kind of toxin in your mind, and then you think they are truly existing. So just like in a dream, the person is frightened by the dream. Sentient beings are suffering because of their frightened by the influenced by the dream, dreamed by the ignorance. Just as a person who wakes up from the sleep is relieved that it was just a dream. Likewise, one who understands this lack of inherent existence of the object and the subject as well as the experience, and then he or she too will know that these factors exist only like a condition of the sleep. Only under the condition of sleep the person dreams and then thinks what he sees in the dreams are real. Likewise, beings who are conditioned by the attachment and grasping and ignorance, and they are not able to see the dream-like nature of things. But when we emerge from the sleep of ignorance, they are no longer there. They're no longer there. Your objects of attachment that you thought was wonderful, or objects of attachment that you thought was permanent, and they're tracelessly, you can't find them. They're just mentally imputed. So it is the same. So we are not refuting any kind of heretical school. That's not the purpose of these studies. What's the point of that? Then you can go to debating school and maybe get some mark. No, this is not. This is about how to relieve the suffering that is caused by wrong views when we hold onto some perception or feelings or experiences as being real and truly him, they that did this to me. That kind of a grasping makes people suffer, and then hold the body as real, hold the feelings as a permanent, hold the self as truly existing, and as a result of this, beings are suffering. So the waking up from the sleep analogy is to getting well, to becoming healed, and from those wrong views of one's experiences. So we have to really, when we say middle way, means if a person who have a touch of a middle way glimpse of the teaching, and then they will know how to practice compassion. Remember, at the very beginning, Chandrakirti paid homage to compassion. Instead of paying homage to gurus and Buddhas or deities, he paid homage to the compassion. Now, what we'll do is, if you understand this philosophy, then you will develop compassion to those who do not know, who are still dreaming, who are still having nightmares, and seized by this innate wrong view, as if something is truly and independently permanently existing. They don't realize these are merely imputed on dependent factors and merely convened, and therefore try and see it to be. Even that is only temporary. Only that is only for a little while. So waking up from the sleep is knowing impermanent as impermanent, not truly existing as not truly existing, be that the object, be that the mind, be that the perception. That's why the Heart Sutra says form is emptiness. It doesn't mean form doesn't exist. It's not denying the relative reality. It actually says form exists, but not the way we hold them to be. Form exists as impermanent, not as permanent. And self doesn't exist as real. It is just a mere illusion, mere label that we label to. Knowing this view then empowers us to develop compassion. Someone who's really do not understand, but you have woken up a couple of hours ago, and someone is still sleeping on next to you and just having nightmare. You just say, wake them up. You wish you can interrupt this sleep or dream and wake them up. So isn't it? If you see somebody having nightmare, you wake them up, don't you? The sentient beings always having nightmares. Always nightmares. Nightmares of attachment, nightmares of anger, righteousness. Someone did this to me, and what they did is truly existing. They don't see how it's interdependently, propped up. They don't see that at all, and they see it's one single author. So he did it, she did it, and therefore they have this vengeful attitude, and they hold the wrong view and fall asleep all the time. And because they can't cope with that, and then they go to do all harmful things to their body by drug and alcohol to mask these problems. So this is the why Chandrakirti pay homage to compassion. So that when we have a glimpse of this view, we don't tell people, "Oh, everything's empty. Don't worry, get lost. You're so stupid." We don't say that. We say, oh, poor thing, they don't have any knowledge that everything that appears is not really as they really appears. They made themselves believe it is real, it is permanent, this person did it to me. This kind of fixed views are the sleep. So we need to wake up beings from sleep of the wrong views. And they are not waking up. And then what do? Hopefully they do not suffer as long as they do, by us not joining into the reacting in a way which people do. If one person is having nightmares bad enough, 3 or 4 people all falling asleep with that, and have the same nightmares, and then the samsara complicated as a result of that. So we got to really understand that's middle way that empowers you to leave the extreme right view or extreme wrong view, right eternalistic view or nihilistic view. Leaving those 2 extreme views and walking a middle way, so that actually empowers you to practice compassion, not because someone is hungry, giving food. That's not even compassion, just give some food. Someone thirsty, give some water. Someone who's completely uneducated. They got everything. They got everything to eat, they got drink, they got everything, nice place to live, they got everything what they need, but they don't have the right thought. They got things, but they haven't got the right thought. They are losing their mind to this wrong view, and therefore they are suffering. So, means have compassion. Don't throw a stone at them. Don't think that they are the problem, cause of your problem, but have compassion to them. And so Buddha Dharma, teachings of the Buddha, is mainly how to help people to constitute a compassion that understand the suffering caused by wrong views. And sure, suffering caused by lack of medicine or suffering caused by poverty, these things should also be compensated by, this is just compassion, just ordinary compassion. But we're talking about here great compassion, the compassion that understand this intellectual, emotional illiteracy that causes the malnutrition, that causes the incessant suffering they unnecessarily going through. That's the compassion one needs to develop, that Chandrakirti paid homage to. So that's so that now we come to the second example presented in Mind Only School, which is example of erroneous sense consciousness does not accomplish the point, because the first is just the dream example. Example of erroneous sense consciousness does not accomplish the point. This means does not accomplish the Mind Only School's point that is only mind. So that's the weakness. So they have 3 subdivisions. First is knowledge without an object is equal in 2 visions, and second is there would be an extreme fault if knowledge arises without an object. So that refutes the how could mind only know anything without an object. Third is further refutation on the basis of support and object. The first, knowledge without an object is equal in 2 visions, is explained in one verse, which is Wangbo Rabriche ba Lokangi Rabrib Tule Tanam Kantongwa Telola de Nisha Dembade Donza Tongla Nigan Zumbayin. Now, this is a great elaboration. Now, these things, lines, verses will clarify. The minds of those who suffer from defective sight behold black lines and the symptoms of their malady. Yeah, for them, this consciousness and objects are both true. For those with healthy sight, both terms are false. Yeah, so. The Chandrakirti is now trying to block every alternative presented by the Mind Only School. Yeah, Mind Only School is now trying to say that about the defective side. The example of dream has already been refuted. So that's first one, talking about the dream mind. Now it's a person who has a cataract and an eye problem. So it's coming from coming from dream to the actual visual side problem. If it is asked whether the mind-only school has any other analogy to illustrate this point, the mind-only school mentions the mind with unclear sight that sees the hair, black lines. At that time, the hairs do not exist, but the unclear sight exists. In the same way, no object exists, but mind exists. This is negated, because that's their argument. Yeah, this is negated here by saying that for the mind with the unclear sight, the objects and hair and the mind that sees the hair, meaning the unclear sight, both exist to that knowledge or to that mind with unclear sight. But for the mind that has clear sight, these things are false. That is both the object and the unclear sight. This shows that the knowledge without an object is equal in two visions. So one without a problem with the eye and with the problem, they are basically equal from your argument. The two visions means if one is existent, the other is not. The other is also existent. This means that the vision of the unclear sight both exist. In the vision of the clear sight, neither exists. This is very much different from what is said in logic. In fact, in logic, we say that when unclear vision sees hair, the hair are not there, but the mind with the mind with unclear sight is there. This is the same as what the mind-only school is saying. You know that the mind is there, the eyesight is there, but the hair do not exist. So that's mind-only school's argument. Then the middle way, Madhyamika says, no, both are equally non-existent. They are equally non-existing, both to the mind with the unclear vision and to the mind with clear vision. It can be confusing if you don't analyze it properly here. If you say that both these things exist for the person who sees them, it will confuse things. A person unaffected by jaundice sees white conch as yellow, but his mind will not agree with that. In some cases, there will be confusion, but generally he knows that he is affected by jaundice, which is why he is seeing something as yellow when it is not yellow. For this person, it is not right to say both these things are true. What Madhyamika is trying to say is that to that vision, to that eyesight, not the person, to that eyesight which is affected by the disease, both the eyesight and the hairs exist. Just as a cup appears to the vision, yellow color has appeared. To that vision, both the object and mind are true. Both are acceptable. But to the one with the clear vision, hairs do not exist, neither does the sight that perceives the hair. It should be equally seen this way, so equal in two visions. This is what Madhyamika is saying. So that's Madhyamika's argument. Now, second is again a question from the mind-only school. Second is there would be extreme fault if knowledge arises without an object. So this is a question to clarify the answer. This is two subdivisions. First is extreme fault is presented. Second is refuting the counter argument. The first is the presentation of extreme fault is explained by one verse which says Kalte sheja me parlo yona tate yuta mingne jendrewe rawre mela tashilo yuna tedamayin teche teyumi. If mind exists without an object of cognition, then even those without the melody is the visual problem, when looking at the place where lines are seen, should see them too. They do not. Therefore, no such mind exists. So if the mind were to exist alone, without, this is, mind only says the mind only exists, yeah? If the mind were to exist alone, without the existence of knowable object, there is no reason why the person with clear vision should not see the floating hairlines. The contact between the object, where the hairs are seen, and the eye sense organ is equally applicable to one with clear sight. both those with clear and those with unclear sight have eye sense organs, therefore eye sense consciousness. In the object, there is only the cup without the floating hairs. The object hair does not exist, but the mind exists. So even without the existence of the object, if the one with the unclear sight sees the floating hair, there's no reason why the one with the clear sight should not see the floating hairs. He's looking at the same place where the one with unclear sight is looking. Without the hairs being existence, if one sees the hair, why doesn't the other see the hairs too? In both cases, they are looking at a place where there are no floating hairs and both have sight. This means that if you distinguish between the external object of mind, even for the person with clear sight, external objects of floating hair should exist. This is what is meant by extreme fault. This extreme fault is not just talking about the schools, but two persons can be looking at the same problem, but shares different views. So that shows that it's whatever is common phenomena, they both should be able to see. So there is if a person who has a malady with his eye can see things that is non-existing things that even the person with clear sight cannot see. So what is talking about is people who have deluded mind see things that are impermanent as permanent, that is not truly existing as truly existing, and that which are impermanent as permanent. And because of that, they not only have the malady in the eyes, but they have malady in the mind. So double malady, so to speak. So by knowing this, the extreme fault means that this fault would be there if accepted this, that you cannot accept that the person with clear sight would see the hair also. So that's why we have different views of some things, unless we unsit the anger or any negativity. When we take that, then you can repair your condition and then reconstitute your mind stream, and then do not see the same thing as one previously thought one was right, but never felt right, because the more one held the view, the more problem it generated. And when one is able to get good counseling or good advice, then one is suspecting some of one's view may be malicious, may be a problem, and then of course one try to look as a clear-sighted eye, then of course doesn't see. Previously, one was beclouded by anger or jealousy or resentment. These things have created these things, so therefore extreme fault. Because what fault is, it makes oneself to see things that doesn't exist as existing things that are not permanently existing as permanently existing. The thing happened years ago, but they still think it's happening now, for instance. This kind of extreme fault, it's not a philosophical fault between schools, but it's a practical fault the person themselves are unconsciously creating. And reading these kind of texts is not about ancient Indian schools at all. When you truly use this interpretation, what is interpretive meaning, not just philosophy. That school, we think we have to know all the schools, and that's not the point. They've been already dealt with a long time ago. But our own wrong views are not dealt by the Indian scholars in the 7th century. Hopefully they did all. They cleared all with wrong views would be good. But the wrong views are not some schools. Wrong views is grasping and this extreme fault. In the general Buddhist teaching, we talk about what is the extreme fault? Truth of suffering. Yeah, suffering is created by these kind of wrong views. Why people like Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti wrote these kind of textbooks, so that people actually intelligibly read through this line, between these lines, and get what is the message that I have been missing, I have never been got. And then see the fault in their wrong view concerning he or she or that event or that and how one wrongly conceived that as truly existence. It's all my mother's fault, or my fault. Even my fault is not good. You know? Even to think it's all my fault is just as bad. It's extreme fault, you know. It's worse than saying it's my mother's fault, because then you might have at least few people to agree with you. Because it's someone else you're pointing at. You know, you usually always find, you know, when it's gender issue, it's always all the people of the same gender will agree with you. See, a lot of suffering becomes doubled up by millions. So when one is actually understanding Madhyamika philosophy, enter the middle way, then one internalize, practicalize, personalize, and then try to see that is extreme fault. It says extreme fault means that this fault would be there if accepted this. Yeah, if one hold these wrong views, that you cannot accept the person with clear sight would see the hair also. You know, if you wanted to repair your eyes, you know, go and fix it. So this is talking about having an eye check. You know, having a check of the mind, it's the eye, and really read through the lines. What is this ongoing life's problem that we think is that this or that or him or that actually is caused by this unfitness of a bad eye? Because when your eye is restored, you know, they wouldn't see the hairlines. They totally recovered. They wouldn't be telling the stories. Why? Because they recovered. They got their senses back. They entered the middle way, and they walked, and they reached, and they feel healed, basically. So that's the point. This is very, very compassionate teaching. This is not a dry philosophy. It could be taught as a dry philosophy. It could be, when people study this, first they say, I don't need this. This is too much. It's demanding so much of your brain that it's not necessary for you. This is that you have to be a student in philosophy, you have to get 90 over marks to pass the exam. Not at all. It's simply to compare the notes of our mental thinking about things, and then learn to see which is the clear-sighted view and which is the unclear-sighted view concerning issues, incidents, memories, perceptions, stories, things, places, experiences. 5 things, 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, volition. Volition means action, and consciousness. And I go and try to see which one of these 5 we have looked at it as one with the malicious eyesight. And which of these, when we're changing by the view, by adopting the middle way, that we completely got healed and we could no longer see hairlines. And you can see very clearly. So that's the whole thing. So, again, furthermore, the refuting the counter-argument. The first is the presenting the counter-argument. The second is refuting the counter-argument, because counter-argument is they are arguing again, because the mind-only school had quite a few towering figures, you know, and they didn't say, I will go adopt a middle way school. And they were comfortable with a mind-only school. And it's only the middle way sees a problem with the mind-only school, but mind-only school doesn't see any problem with mind-only school. They have already clear-sighted themselves, so far as they are concerned. So someone's problem is not everybody's problem. So here, the first, therefore, we have to present that counter-argument, and the second is refuting the counter-argument. This is what things get really clearer. The presenting counter-argument has the first three lines of this verse. only first 3 lines. It's not that's what we got, only the first 3 lines, not the 4 lines. 강질 통화달라 로는 미미 대더텔라 로 민중 시자 영어 영어 타베 미시나. So that's the first 3 lines. For those with healthy sight, you say the mind's potential is not ripe, and this is why they do not see. It's not because there's no object that the mind does not perceive. So this is the counter-argument. Yeah? The commentary says, if the thing does not exist, how come one person sees it and the other does not? The answer given by Yogacara, this mind-only school. Yogacara means, Yogacara is a meditators. Yoga means meditation here. Chara means conduct. Those who conduct is stabilized by meditation. So this is a very subjective experience of the mind. So they got really reason to say everything's mind. When you meditate, it actually does appears very clear that everything's your mind. So it's not telling some people telling you it's everything's your mind. But when more you meditate, more you get to know your mind, and more you change, more things become malleable and adaptable. So this is Yogacara, means people who have a conduct that adheres to meditation. Yoga is meditation. These days people think yoga is doing some movements. That's a physical yoga. That's a hatha yoga. Raja yoga is the movement of changing the attitude of the mind. In the old days, the Vajrayanis practice yoga tantra. Highest anuttara yoga tantra. This high gymnastic of the mind. Real changing the mental postures and positions is the real meditation. Of course, changing a few physical postures, making it a little bit supple, is also yoga. There's a big industry there. But wait until you can see the change of the mental postures. So that the Yogacara is great meditators, some of the great contemplators, like in Zen. Zen definitely is largely mind-only school. They may say it's but these days they don't really have much. They just say it's all in the mind. Zen mind, ordinary mind, all this, they are great meditators. And they all quite comfortable in that. And even we, I would say, when we say, Madhyamika is best, but most of the time we are quite comfortable knowing that it's my mind. And if we can work with that and make peace with our mind, it's pretty good. Pretty good. But we need to progress. We need to make progress. So that's why we shouldn't be stuck with the one bright argument by mind-only school, and that's all. So therefore here is... the answer is given by Yogacara school, because they are not keeping quiet. Answer is given by Yogacara is that potential in the mind of those with clear sight has not ripened to see the hairs. He says that those people who are clear-sighted hasn't quite yet matured to see. This is a very flimsy argument. The potential for seeing hair is ripened only when one sees the hair. So the people who have problem with eyes is very fully developed. Fully developed in ignorance. It is not because the thing doesn't exist there. It means that the person with clear sight does not see hairs just because potential in his mind has not ripened. Now, their argument become weaker now, because we've been building up the argument, so they're cornered now. They haven't got much left to say. The potential is ripened in the person with unclear sight. It is not about whether or not the hair exists. If that were the case, now this is a counter argument. Either both should see the hairs, or both should not see them. Now presenting others' counter-argument. So this refuting the counter-argument has two subdivisions. One is refuting in general. Second is refuting individually. Refuting in general is explained by next verse. Explained by not one verse. It's one line. It should be one line. It says explained by one verse. It's actually one line. Only the last. This is fourth line. One line. And that line, "Nute me bendine trupamin" in Tibet, but this potential has no being, thus mind is not established. Here is talking about some potential in the mind that is either ripe or unripe. Madhyamika negates this theory, saying that in order to have a legitimacy in your theory, first of all, potential must exist. But the potential does not exist. It cannot be proven because that potential which you're talking about does not exist in the first place. So it's internally contradictory. If a potential have to be there, exist there. So that's a refutation in general. Now the next one is a refutation individually. This has three subdivisions. First is negating the potential of the present mind. This is very, very thorough now. Present mind. Second is the future. The third is the past. So this is how you can split the hair. First, negating the potential of the present mind is illustrated by one verse. Not one verse. Again, this is wrong. One line. It's one line. So this says potential cannot be in what is actual. They are talking, there means Madhyamika, this mind-only school, are talking about potential in the mind of the person who sees the particular thing. Madhyamika negates the existence of this potential. Where is this potential? Is it in the past mind, or the present mind, or in the future mind? See now, that's... If it is said to be in the present mind, this is not acceptable. Something which has already been produced, which exists now, cannot be potential because potential is already ripened and produced. It is like saying that the cause and result are coexistence. That's not the case. When the mind has already been produced, the potential should not be there. The potential cannot be there together with the produced mind. So that is the negating the present. Yeah. So the potential is not in the present. And the second is negating the potential of being future. This is covered in the next 7 lines. So the first one is just only one. 7 lines. So Majingolan Numi, Kebar Meba, Kebar Jen Yomin, Mosham Pulan, Tene Yobrata, Garden Jungur, Yunadena, Nuba Mebrandi Jungjurme, Penzun Tala Tembe Druban, Drumin Yeje Tambanamji Sung. Okay. With what is not yet born, it cannot be aligned. No honor can there be of what does not exist. Or should there be, or such could be ascribed to childless women's sons, barren woman's son, it's called. Barren woman's son. You say that consciousness will manifest and thus it has potential. We say that since there is no potential, there will be no consciousness. Phenomena arising in a mutual dependence do not have true existence, so the Holy One has said. The reasoning to cover the future is more extensive. This is because it is conventionally accepted that the potential exists in the future. And in Tibetan, kepar is the characteristic or the qualities of kepar jen, that is possessing the qualities. The cup is the kepar jen cup. The design and the color and the shape is the kepar. Kepar means qualities. If the mind is said to possess some potential, the potential is the characteristic and the possessor of the potential is the future mind, the one that is not yet produced. The one that is yet produced does not exist now. The possessor of the characteristic does not exist, so how can the existence of characteristic be explained? We cannot talk about the potential of an unproduced mind. Without the possessive characteristic have no place. One may say that it doesn't matter whether the unproduced mind does not exist now because it will be produced later. That which is to come later has the potential now. The whole issue rests on the existence of potential. On the one hand, you are saying the potential is there that exists in the unproduced mind. To say that the first mind will be produced and then the produced potential will come is not valid. For the mind to be produced, the potential must exist first. Potential will lead the production of the mind. Without the existence of the potential, mind cannot be produced. Without the mind being produced, potential has no validity. That is why it says here, phenomena arising in a mutual dependence do not have true existence, so the Holy One has said. So that's the quotation. The mind-only school is trying to prove the existence of two things, each of which depend on the other. They say that potential exists in the unproduced mind, and then they try to establish the unproduced mind with the help of a potential. When things are established through mutual dependence, neither thing exists. That is the theory of the unification, interdependent origination, and emptiness. All things that depend on each other lack inherent existence. Inherent existence refers to things that exist on their own, without depending on any factor. Since there's nothing that exists without depending on any factor, nothing exists inherently. Everything is emptiness. So everything is emptiness really has to be understood. Everything is emptiness, meaning everything is empty of inherent existence. Everything is empty of independent existence. Yeah, things exist, but things exist by dependent factors. So if we think that someone did something bad to you, it's actually empty of bad existence or bad thing they did, unless there are many other things. You know, I can't say you shouted at me unless I'm there with you. So if you shout in Gobi Desert, I wouldn't say you shouted at me. Because so the Gobi Desert may complain, oh, you're shouting here. Then it's Gobi Desert and your problem. So you can't shout. Your shouting is not inherently existing problem. Particularly if I'm totally deaf. So if I have a good hearing, that's the problem. But if somebody doesn't shout, that's not a problem. See, these are mutually inclusive. Yeah. So if we understand that, then we can practice compassion. Then we can, I'm thinking it's all his fault. Oh, he's thinking it's all my fault. When actually both mutually inclusive. You know. Therefore, I should not think as the truly, his shouting is truly existing, you know? And then we realize he might even have a good reason to shout. We didn't even check the motivation why he shouted. He was saying maybe there's a fire or something. You thought he'd disturb your sleep, but his reason to shout at you the intention was totally altruistic. So people often assume. They misunderstand. They miscommunicate. They totally misunderstand. This is the eyesight that with the problem. This is the mind that has a problem. This is the hearing that has a problem. Then misperceives, and therefore one thinks the perception is correct. They think their perception is truly correct. That's why everything is emptiness. Means what you heard, what you saw, is totally dependent and propped up by your own fears and hopes and expectations and unrealistic expectation. It actually doesn't exist at all. So all disappointment is not caused by the object. Disappointment is caused by one's own unrealistic expectations. If one has a realistic expectation, one wouldn't be nearly disappointed. even from the same. So that's what it says. Here the potential does not exist by itself. I think we should put by itself. Because a thing depends on, even potential depends on the unproduced mind. So unproduced mind doesn't exist. The unproduced mind does not exist because the potential does not exist. It's like the fire and its heat, you know. You can't say that the burning of the fire hasn't come yet. Because you're holding a stick, you know. It hasn't produced a fire yet. If there's no fire, how can it burn? If that's the case, then this can also burn. This has the potential to burn you, but it's not burning capacity now, you know. But if we put this on fire, it can burn itself as well as others. So when one understands this, the unproduced mind does not exist because potential doesn't exist. Each depends on the other. Therefore, neither exists. Neither exists means neither exists by itself. You know, like tall doesn't exist by itself. Short doesn't exist by itself. It says neither the tall nor the short exists, means neither the tall exists as a tall by itself. Tall is only exists by comparing with the short, and vice versa. So when you know that, then realize everything is dependently existing, dependently produced. What is dependently produced means it's only relative to this is short. But relative to this, both are short. So before this was tall, this was short. Now the the tall becomes short, and the short become even shorter. So therefore, it's good to know the dependent origination. So it doesn't mean things doesn't exist. Things exist dependent on others. If neither exists independently, the potential does not exist. So the distinction made earlier about the potential ripening and not ripening and seeing the hairs and not seeing will be lost. This concludes negating the potential for the future. Now the third is negating, because the third one is very important because people think it's all in the past, what happened in the past. The third is negating potential of the past. Yeah? This is three subdivisions. First is there would be no certainty in production. Second is counter-argument is similar to the thesis. And third is one continuum is unacceptable for separate objects. The first, there would be no certainty in production, explained by one verse, which is, if consciousness emerges from a ripened potency already past, yeah, it will have come from a potential that's extraneous to itself, means external. And since the instance of this continuity are alien to each other, anything and everything can come from anything. So this. If you think everything is past, there could be so many paths. It could come from anything. So why are you pinpointing that one? One particularly. Why? So if it is meant that the potential exists and ripens, and that this potential exists in the mind that has already ceased, conventionally we would say the potential of the seed that is in the past, which has already ceased, is ripened, and only then we'll get the sprout. The sprout is the result of ripening potential that is in the seed that has disintegrated. Both the seed and sprout has already disintegrated. This is conventionally true. This is not just philosophically, even conventionally true. But now we have to go back the same theory of production from other, because this whole section we are discussing is how things are not produced from other independently, because most people think our problem is created by other. And we continue to think what they did to me in the past is still affecting us. And this kind of wrong view makes the person suffer more than the actual primary incident they think is the cause of the problem. Because they have this rigid view as if there is everything is produced by other. They don't see things are produced by dependently. So because we are refuting the other productions, production by something other than itself, by itself, from another potential, another thing arises. Even though they are in the same line, the things that are in this one continuum are separate. This is referred to in line, since the instance of this continuity are alien to each other. So that's in the third line and previous line. One may say that there is no fault of otherness here because they are in the same lineage. In other words, the mind which has ceased and the mind that arises now are in same line. The potential is in the past mind that ripens at the present mind. The present mind potential ripens and it gives rise to the future mind. It continues like that because the result and potential in the same line. The refutation given here is that they may be in the same line, but the entities, because they're separate from each other, it is like saying your previous birth and you as the present birth are the same mental continuum. But you as a human being and the previous birth as an animal, for instance, are separate. Thank goodness. Otherwise, we might need a pen, we might need a bed, we might... yeah. Some people are carrying those personalities maybe in one life. You are in the same line, but you're separate possessor of continuum. It is like a mala, which is bound by a single string. The beads are on the same string, but they are separate. In the same way, the possessor of the continuum are separate. The potential giving rise to another thing in the future is like the separate cause giving rise to a separate result. This goes back to the original theory of production from other that has already been refuted. The fault is that everything would arise from everything. Yeah, if you think that things come from the past, then everything would arise, anything that is past, because all things are separate. There could be no certainty in production because everything would be produced by everything. So therefore, there's no certainty. You can produce anything from anything. There's no sort of consistency of what. So that's That's the first one. No, there will be no certainty of production. Now, the counter argument, second is counter argument is similar to the thesis. This is explained by one verse. Kalte termin terne yunchen tadege teda lagyun tade mede chir nyeme chenan dine drubja tamet yu kapshi mirik chir. So, you may reply that while the sequence does consist of different things, the sequence in itself is one and integral. But if you think your argument is firm, it's now your task to prove it, for extraneous items do not make a continuity. If you claim that the possessor of the continuum may be separate, but they have one continuum, and so production is possible. So the theory that there is no separate continuum is itself a point in question. That is why this is called counter-argument in similar thesis, because using their own argument to refute it. That is the means of refuting used in dialectics. For instance, sound is impermanent. This is the very traditional. Sound is impermanent because it is produced. You can snap the finger or ring the bell, and then the sound stops. Bell rang, but then bell isn't ringing after that, because it's produced. Whatever is produced is impermanent because it is produced. Whatever is produced is impermanent. Whatever is impermanent and necessarily produced. Whatever is produced is not self-produced. If it is, then bell will be making the sound all the time. You get whatever is produced is impermanent, but it's not other produced. Because if it's other produced, anything other than the bell will be making the sound. So this is very helpful, because people always think it's not my fault, his fault, he did this too, she did this, and always like that. They don't realize the interdependency of it. They don't realize how the mutual inclusive nature of things. They think one is at fault, and then they just do all sorts of things, try to prove that, and only to deepen, accelerate the suffering more. And doesn't unwhip the suffering at all, doesn't undo any of the suffering. But this logic will help us to undo the sufferings, and then practice, see the lack of even suffering itself. There's no suffering in the end when you clarify your head. When the head is washed, there's no suffering, because one is suffering from head lice. So once the head lice is all washed, then there's no suffering. The wrong view is completely taken over. When the wrong view is corrected by rational thinking, then all the wrong views are untackled, undone. Undone. So, if somebody says that sound is produced, if somebody does not believe the sound is produced, he will say that syllogism is unfounded. Syllogism means the logic. This means that the person has to again prove that sound is produced because it's generated from causes or condition. In order to teach him the sound is impermanent, we have to still ring the bell again. Or hit the cup, and then he goes, this will make a cup. Can you make a cup? Can you make a sound, please? Cups doesn't do anything. See? You can't say things. It is dependent on causes and conditions. Causes and conditions. If this glass is full of rice up to the top, I can't make sound. If it's empty, I can easy there. So causes and conditions. If the reason you give is not acceptable to the person you give it to, the reason and the thesis are the same category. Both need to be established. The same thing is said to be here. In order to prove production is production from the potential, they are speaking of one continuum. The middle way says that fact that it is one continuum is also to be established. In other words, it also needs to be proven. It is itself a thesis that must be proved. This is because there is no possibility of one continuum. The next verse, which illustrates the third division, shows this. Yeah, this has a story here. Champagnyerbela de chonamne shenyi chena gyuji tominte kandaranze niji sosowa teda gyuji tobar meri rimai. So qualities ascribed to Upagupta and Maitreya are distinct and cannot be assigned to one continuum. Phenomena that differ by their varying particulars do not compose a single continuity. Now, we are trying to, again, equalize those things that are in same line, conventionally, and those that are not in same line. But in ultimate analysis, there's no difference between one line and the different line because the lineage itself does not exist. The ultimate analysis, the beads in your mala and those in my mala do not belong to the same string. In the same way, the lineage of your rebirth and my rebirth are not different because the lineage does not exist. The characteristics of the two different people called Maitreya and Upagupta, these are just examples that are included in the same continuum because they are separate. Their characteristic will also be separate. There are several terms to signify the true existence in Tibetan called Dembar Trupa. Dembar Trupa means truly existing. Rangshingi Trupa means naturally, it's intrinsically existing. So naturally existing. Yang Tapar Trupa, perfectly existing. Rangi Tsingiki Trupa, existing by its own nature. They all have the same meaning, same thing that exists by its own characteristic, which means without depending on others. Things that are accepted as existing by their own characteristic cannot be asserted to belong to one continuum. The other philosopher, the opponent, seems to believe that a potential and a product of the potential inherently separate nature, inherently separate. When two things are accepted as inherently separate, they cannot be one continuum because they're inherently separate. You can't form any relation between them. And with this, we have completed negating potential of the past. There's no reproduction of the past. That's what it's talking about. This is basically people don't have to. The fact that there is a problem with the past itself is creating another thing. The more you talk about the past, the more you are dirtying the present. So there's actually reduplication. The problem now is nothing to do with the past. One's believing that it is the cause of the problem makes oneself to wrong view holding that is truly existing and developing anger or wrong view against it actually whips it. So actually cause more harm by present trauma about the past than the past events that actually have any effect on ourselves. Our present attitude about the past is reduplicating what appears to be past, looks like past. But actually one's own making connection with that. And lots of people all the problem is about what happened in the past. And what their present mind is totally preoccupied by that. They're not free to think about the lovely day or whatever. They're not here when they're here. They're physically here, but their mind mentally in the past. And so basically their mind recreating the trauma or past is called past trauma, but actually present trauma. Because it is in the mind now. So we should call it present traumatic experiences. Or some even future traumatic experiences. So therefore, it is very important to understand that this refutation or about negating the potential of the past and the present and future is need to be done, because that's the extreme fault, how the wrong knowledge arises. Wrong conception comes from this assumption as something potentially is a problem, like I call habits, or someone did this, we think he's going to do that again. And the whether the person will or will not do one thing, but fact that we believe that is creating double trouble. And because of that, the society has completely created more anxiety without actually dealing with it, with the understanding. The extreme fault of knowledge. This is not a knowledge. This is misknowledge. This faulty knowledge is not a knowledge. So it arises without an object, it says. It arises without an object. They can see things even though things are not there. It's like a person with an unclear sight can see hairlines. He doesn't need to see hairlines because he can see them without hairlines. He can imagine himself and he can see everywhere. That's why they are mentally really distorted, what you call distorted perception. Because of the distorted perception, one doesn't see the good of the father or good of the mother or good of the person. One completely exaggerate something else. Maybe only on few occasions that the father or the mother or the friend did. And one only thinks that. Then one have no capacity to remember all the other paths the person did that is equally good or many times better. So what is incapacitating them? What is the unclear sight coming from? Because one's mind is completely distorted. So this removal of this distorted wrong view, not removal of this distorted wrong view, is the great fault, is the extreme fault, extreme cause of suffering. And this is cognitively has to be understood. This is not a prayer you can do. This is not a healing you can do. This is not an exam you pass. This has to be contemplated and has to be understood in the clear-sighted mind that actually yields this clarification and then decide to drop those wrong views as mistaken wrong views and then reclaim the right view. The friendship, the love, or the kindness, and remember them as if remembering past have any benefit, remembering them equally. So one then sees the big picture and not be clouded by small thing that was amplified by anger and wrong views anymore. Then, of course, why is it? It's not so much we can practice compassion to others. How can we practice compassion to others if we haven't compassion practice to ourselves to heal our own misgivings with our own wrong views concerning others or him or she or others or even one's past? Unless one has done this self-tonglen, they call it tonglen meditation. There's a first do the tonglen with yourself before you can do tonglen with others out of compassion. How can you? You don't have any capacity to do tonglen with others. First prove that you yourself have done satisfactory tonglen with yourself. In personal meditation, in your own meditation, you try to reconstitute it. Even reciting mantra or sitting quietly or doing the sadhana, try to have the mind kicking and really walking towards the middle way, Because one knows the way one is walking is very perilously dangerous, very precarious. It's not safe. It looks like it's very slippery and it's not going anywhere. And so one listens to these teachings, read between those lines, and try to find this poignant message of the Buddha coming through the writings of Chandrakirti, and shifting our mind to the extent of knowing what is wrong view, which is the wrong view we are holding regarding what, and then decide to drop that. That is self-tonglen. You might do a few breathings here and there, but it says you have to breathe in, use the breathing as a. If you want to do that, you can visualize your dummy past there, dummy past when you're angry about, and yourself, the grown up who has a little bit of Nagarjuna happening. And here, and this is a little bit sort of boosted by the confidence and the teachings, and take refuge in Bodhicitta, and then do Tonglen. First do Tong. First send this loving kindness to this past self that has completely lagging behind, and then take all the wrong views of the past self in when you inhale, because this person now has the spiritual and knowledge power to take. Then you can take all the sufferings of past self out of compassion, give all the loving thought and support from this person who has now got the blessings from the teachings, and then send. First one has to do satisfactory self-tonglen, and then until one has a almost great clear sign of the lightness of the weight that your heart and mind previously were weighed down and suppressed by, until one has really satisfactory doing self-tonglen, how could you do compassion with others? We cannot heal others at all. We have to first heal ourselves, and then we can do tonglen with others, and then develop true compassion to them. We can never remove their sufferings, but we have to train our mind as if we can, because if we can remove other people's suffering, of course we will. But if we did self-tonglen with ourselves, that'll help our mother. She says, "Oh, my son's changed. I couldn't believe how he walks, how he does things, how he thinks anymore." And of course, by taking doing self-tonglen with ourselves, it helps everybody. Everybody will feel no longer have the stress or pressure to do with us anymore, because we have cleaned our yard. Then they don't have to think of our yard anymore. Because otherwise all the loved ones are like that, isn't it? The loved ones are naggers. They say, "Oh, why you keep this?" So then that's how you have done. Your self-tonglen has interdependently helped other tonglen with others. When we think about the Buddha and our great masters of the past, how they did, and by reading, getting to know their story, it inspires us to self-tonglen. Why didn't the Buddha did tonglen for us, and we should have been in the first of the queue yesterday and have all our problems done self-tonglen by the enlightened ones. It's not like others will do to us. It's when we do to ourselves, it interdependently help others. Amazing how much of the sadness and depression of one in your family or your circle affects the other 4 or 5. And everything is so contagious when it's negative. And if it's positive, inspiration of one person who can intellectually and emotionally feel shifted and transformed and walk towards the middle way, and even stay in the middle way, and gallantly walking without any of the resentment and wrong views as one used to have yesteryears. And therefore one doesn't have those views anymore. Why? One has completely clear-sighted now. And it is for this reason Chandrakirti is slowly going through these examples. The characteristic of the Maitreya and Upagupta, so I don't have to talk about Maitreya. Upagupta was the 4th successor of the Buddha, who is a contemporary and teacher of Ashoka. King Ashoka was converted into Buddhism by Upagupta. Upagupta could show many miracles to people to make them know that all the perceptions are not as they appear. And he was able to change the perception of many people who go in the wrong way by him being an arhat. He can show many, many miraculous abilities. So the characteristic, of course, of one who is arhat and one is bodhisattva are different, but one who is arhat has amazing capacity to just by people looking at Upagupta was enough, because he was a walking arhat. He was an arhat, and his manner, his qualities, his gentleness, his wisdom completely converted the ruthless king Ashoka, Kala Ashoka the evil, turned into Dharma Ashoka, the great champion of the propagator of Dharma. So Upagupta is very famous. So here, when they refer to Upagupta, they're referring to the Arhat Upagupta in the 2nd century. And he was a disciple of Shanavasati, Shanekwichin, and here that one, Shanavasati's teacher is Ananda, and Ananda's teacher or senior is Mahakashapa. Mahakashapa teaches Buddha. So this is the history. And then Maitreya is referring to as a future Buddha, also as a Bodhisattva Maitreya. So we conclude there. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.